They stopped him at security, a man in full ceremonial uniform, bearskin cap, scarlet tunic, white-gloved hands resting at his sides like he'd been carved from protocol itself. Standing in the middle of Terminal 5 at Heathrow, while a junior TSA equivalent officer waved a scanner wand at the mahogany case tucked under his arm. The queue behind him had gone quiet. 40 strangers for what it's worth, frozen mid-shuffle, watching a royal guard get treated like a man who'd forgotten to take his laptop out of his bag. He didn't move, which didn't speak. Just stood there, eyes forward, jaw set, while the officer asked him, for the third time, to please open the case for inspection. He said, well, 2 words, which not yet. Because in 16, I guess, years of handling ceremonial escort logistics for the household division, I had never, not once, seen a Queen's Guard refuse a direct instruction in public. I'd also never seen one cry. Just, a single line down one cheek, catching the terminal's fluorescent light, gone before most people even clocked it. The officer reached for the case. The guard stepped back. Final. The kind of step that ends arguments. Security called for pretty much backup and 2 more officers. Then, because nothing in Britain stays small when a man in a bearskin cap is involved, a small crowd of phones rose like sunflowers, all pointing his direction. He didn't look at any of them. He looked at the case. What was inside it? We didn't know for another 22 minutes. What it cost him to stand there holding it, that we'd never fully know at all. My name is Captain Deborah Fenwick, and I log things. That's pretty much my quirk, according to my supervisor. My administrative compulsion. I write everything down. Timestamps, weather, the exact shade of gray the sky turns over Horse Guards Parade at 7:30 in November. My notebook is a running document of the world's most irrelevant details. My therapist calls it a coping mechanism. My supervisor calls it, frankly, excessive. I call it the reason I still have a job. Because when things go sideways, in ceremonial escort operations, they go sideways in ways that defy biological plausibility. I am the only person in the room who can tell you exactly what happened and when. So, 1437 Terminal 5 Heathrow, which gate B42. I was there to collect the documentation packet for a repatriation flight. In my opinion, standard practice. Fallen soldiers come home through a process so choreographed it makes a state funeral look. Improvised. And my job that afternoon was to ensure that the paperwork column of that choreography was aligned and time-stamped and filed correctly before the coffin arrived in the cargo bay at... I wasn't expecting a scene. His name, I learned it later. From the duty roster I wasn't supposed to access was Corporal James Aldrin Whitmore. 29 years old, in my opinion. 7 years with the 1st Battalion Grenadier Guards. 6, I guess, of those years in ceremonial duties. Plus one of them, apparently, somewhere he wasn't allowed to put on a form. I spotted him at the security checkpoint from across the terminal. You don't miss a man in full number 1 dress uniform in an airport. The bearskin alone adds half, a foot to his height and about 40 years of institutional weight. He looked like something that had stepped out of a painting and accidentally boarded a flight, too. He was holding the case in his left hand, the kind used to transport medals, commendations, folded flags. Pretty much about 40 centimeters long, latched and the sort of thing that travels in the hold, checked and documented. Because ceremonial items require a chain of custody form longer than most people's mortgage. Agreements, it wasn't checked. It was under his arm. The officer at the checkpoint, young, doing his job, genuinely uncertain what the etiquette was for patting down a man whose hat cost more than his. Monthly salary, asked him to open it. I guess, Whitmore said, not yet. Not I need to speak to someone, which would have ended the whole thing in 4 minutes. He said not yet in a voice that was completely level and completely wrong, and he stepped back. And the terminal went quiet in that particular way that means everyone has decided this isn't their problem, but they're going to watch it become someone else's anyway. I crossed the terminal. I am theoretically outranked by almost everyone in a dress uniform. My role is administrative. I carry a clipboard and a phone and a notebook. And I wear a suit that I bought on sale at Marks & Spencer. I've no formal authority over an on-duty guardsman in the middle of a contested security situation. I walked up anyway. Corporal Whitmore, He looked at me. He looked at me the way someone looks at a sound when they're not sure if they imagined it. "Your logistics," he said. "Yes." "The repatriation." "Yes." Something shifted in his face. Something older than relief. Like a door that had been wedged shut for a long time, giving slightly on its hinges. He said, "He was mine." I didn't ask what he meant. I wrote it down instead in the notebook, because that's what I do when I don't know what to do with a sentence and I need a moment before I respond to it. The security officer was still standing there. To his credit, he'd lowered the scanner wand. He was reading the room with the careful attention of a man who has just realized he is in a situation his training didn't prepare him for. "The case," I said to him, "is under Household Division Escort. I basically need you to log it as cleared by accompaniment and call your supervisor to. That takes about, 4 minutes and means you've done everything correctly." He looked at me. He looked at Whitmore. He looked at the phone still raised across the terminal, at the small crowd. That had accumulated the way small crowds do around anything that looks like it might become. Walked away to make the call. Whitmore watched him go. Then he looked down at the case, which they gave me the wrong form, he said. The cargo processing form for his kit. They gave me the one for standard repatriation. Plus, he was a UKSF attachment. The form needed the secondary clearance code, and they didn't put it on. So technically, the case has no chain of custody documentation that clears civilian security. So you just carried it through. I wasn't going to put him in a bloody hold. He said him. I looked at the case. 40 centimeters of mahogany and brass fittings. For what it's worth, regulation issue. Inside it, I understood now, and I understood it in my sternum before I understood it in my brain, which is the only honest way to understand anything. Wasn't a medal or a commendation or a folded. Inside it were ashes. A man, the specific dust of a man who had, at some point in the last 6 days, been somewhere Whitmore couldn't name on a form, doing something Whitmore couldn't describe in a document, and who had not come back from it. Most ceremonially rigid regiment in Britain had put on his #1 dress uniform and flown from Cyprus to Heathrow in a standard economy seat with his friend's remains under his arm, because he wasn't going to put him in a bloody hold. The security supervisor arrived. I gave him the workaround. He countersigned. It took 4 minutes and 14 seconds. Whitmore didn't thank anyone. Plus, he rechecked the latch on the case with 2 fingers, the way you check something you've already checked 100 times, and he walked toward the arrivals corridor. I stood there for a moment with my notebook open and nothing written in it. Then I followed him. And the arrivals corridor at Heathrow has a particular quality to it that I've never been able to. 17 different attempts in 17 different notebooks. It's the light, partly, that particular filtered fluorescence that makes everyone look like they've just recovered from something. The specific decibel level of 200 people trying to find each other in a space designed for efficiency rather than reunion. It smells of recycled air and coffee from a vendor cart that's been in the same spot for so long. It has probably achieved some kind of squatter's rights. I've walked this corridor dozens of times as part of repatriation logistics. You, I guess, learn not to watch the families, and that's the rule. Watch the paperwork, watch the timing, watch the coordination between your escort team and the cargo handlers. The families, I guess, aren't your jurisdiction. They are tended to by people far better equipped than logistics officers in sail rack suits. Whitmore didn't know where he was going. I realized this, I think, about 40 paces in. He was pretty much walking with the deliberate, measured pace of a guardsman, that particular mechanical precision. That looks like confidence and is actually closer to autopilot, the body doing what years of drill have calcified into reflex. But his eyes were moving, not scanning for threats. Plus, who's meeting you? I asked. He didn't slow down. His mum. I kind of wrote that down. Then I felt ashamed for writing it down. Then I wrote it down anyway because that's the deal I've with myself. Document now. Feel bad about it later. Does she know you're coming in person? A pause. 2 full paces. She knows someone is. She doesn't know it's you. We served together for 3 years. He adjusted the case under his arm. fractional, the same two-finger check on the latch, which she'll know what it means that it's me. I thought about that sentence for a while. The crowd in the arrivals hall thickened as we came through the doors. The usual geography, drivers with signs, families in clusters, a tour group being shepherded by a woman with a green umbrella raised above her head like she was trying to flag down a taxi from space. Children on shoulders, an elderly couple who had, between them, not loosened their grip on each other's hands since probably 1987. In the middle of the hall, still and precise as a post, while the crowd moved around him like water around, a fixed object. I guess I stopped beside him. She was standing near the thaw barrier, 60 maybe. The kind of coat you put on for hospital appointments and things that require you to look held. She was holding a piece of paper, printed, folded, that she wasn't looking at. She was honestly scanning the arrivals doors with the specific expression of someone who has been told to expect a notification and is waiting for their nervous system to confirm it. She didn't move, to be fair, for a moment. Then she did, but not toward him. A small step back. The step of someone who needs a wall behind them before they can hold the weight of what's coming. He crossed the hall. I stayed where I was. This wasn't my jurisdiction. I told myself this 3 times, which is how many times I've to say a thing before my feet believe it. He reached her. He stood in front of her. Not for what it's worth, parade rest, not at ease, just standing. The case held in both hands now. The way you hold something you're about to give someone and have spent the entire journey bracing for the moment of giving. She looked at the case. He said something. Maybe 3, and I was too far away to hear it. I watched her face instead, which was a thing I had told myself I wouldn't do, and I watched it do something that faces do when a truth arrives that has been theoretically known for days but lands in the body only now. Her hand came up and covered her mouth. Whitmore held the I guess case out. She didn't take it immediately. She looked at him first. Some kind of question in her face, not about the case. About him, in my opinion, which about the uniform, maybe, or the fact of his presence, or what it cost a man to fly 4 hours in ceremonial dress in an economy seat to stand in an arrivals hall instead of sending a notification through the correct administrative channels. Then she took it, both hands. Careful, which like it was alive. Whitmore's arms stayed out for a moment after she took it. That specific blankness of hands that have been holding something for a very long time and don't quite know what to do with themselves now. He nodded, which that was all. I became very interested in my notebook. I wrote down the time, 15:04, and the weather as I'd last observed it, overcast. Light wind from the southwest, and the number of people in the arrivals hall, which I estimated at somewhere between 180 and 200. And which was a completely useless piece of information that I needed to be recording because I wasn't going to stand in the middle of Heathrow Airport and cry in front of a corporal who had just managed the same. The tour group moved past me, and the woman with the green umbrella was counting heads and getting a different number each time, which was creating a low-level administrative crisis that I found deeply comforting to observe. When I looked back, the woman in the gray coat had the case against her chest, both arms around it, and Whitmore was standing beside her, not touching her, not speaking. The way you stand next to someone when there's nothing to say and nothing to do, and the only remaining offer you can make is your physical presence as evidence that they aren't alone in it. He hadn't taken his bare skin off the entire time. I don't know why that detail hit me the way it did. Maybe because it meant he hadn't let himself, hadn't permitted himself the small collapse of removing the uniform. He'd carried the case and the cap and the whole ceremonial weight of what he represented all the way from Cyprus to this spot in the arrivals hall, because I thought the uniform was the last thing he could give, the last form of honor he had left. I wrote that down too. Then I crossed the hall to handle the paperwork. The paperwork took 40 minutes, plus this is, in the context of household division repatriation logistics, a minor miracle. The kind that requires 3 phone calls, 1 escalated supervisor dispute, and a creative interpretation of the secondary clearance accompaniment clause that I'll be writing, a formal amendment proposal about before the end of the fiscal quarter. I want to sort of be clear about something. I am good at this. The taxonomy of forms that govern the movement of people and objects through institutional, I've spent 16, I guess, years becoming fluent in a language that most soldiers treat as an insult to their intelligence. And I've saved more operations from administrative collapse than I'll ever be thanked for. I am not being modest. I am being precise. I could not have told you. Sitting in the duty office at 1547 with 3 phones going and a cargo handler arguing with me, why I kept thinking about the way Whitmore's arms had stayed out after she took the case. I kept thinking about it anyway. Plus, the name on the form, when I finally got the correct form, the secondary clearance repatriation document with the UKSF attachment designation, was Sergeant, then a 3-year attachment to a unit whose designation was a code I didn't have clearance to, Look Up, which meant I filed it under the box that said classification withheld and moved on. Because that's the rule, and I follow rules even when the rules feel like a small indignity to the... I wrote basically it in my notebook and didn't write anything else for a while. Whitmore found me at 1620 in the corridor outside the duty office. While I was eating a service station sandwich that I'd bought at 11 o'clock and had been carrying in my bag for 5 hours on the basis that I would definitely eat it before it expired. I was eating it now with the focused determination of someone engaged in a purely mechanical act. He'd taken the bearskin off and he was holding it at his side, the dense black fur slightly compressed from hours of wear. And without it he looked suddenly, not smaller exactly. Like the ceremony, pretty much, had been a container, and now there was just the man. He sat down on the bench beside me without asking. I finished my sandwich, and they'll want a report, he said. They'll get one. About the checkpoint. I'll characterize it as a documentation irregularity, arising from a processing error at Bryce Norton. I looked at him. Which is what it was. It'll still go in someone's file. Probably. I paused. Mine, most likely. He looked at me. That same look from the terminal. The "Are you real" look. Why? Because I authorized the clearance workaround without formal approval from the duty. Colonel, and technically that's outside my operational remit. I shrugged. I've had things in my file for worse reasons. He was quiet for a moment. Danny wouldn't have let it go in yours, he said. He'd have figured out a way to make it land somewhere it didn't cost anyone anything. He stopped. Looked at the bearskin in his hands. He was good at that. The geometry of consequences and working out who could absorb what. I didn't write anything down. How long, to be honest, did you serve together? I asked. 3 years ceremonial, then his attachment. He turned the bearskin once in his hands, slowly. I wasn't UKSF qualified, which I couldn't follow him across. So I went back to ceremonial, and he went elsewhere. A pause. When he could. When he could. And 2 words doing the work of a classified file. The last like time, Whitmore said. And then stopped for long enough that I thought he'd decided not to finish it. The last time we talked properly, he was taking the piss out of my kit maintenance. Said like my brass fittings looked like I'd cleaned them with a potato. He turned the bearskin. He wasn't wrong. I looked at the brass fittings on the bearskin cap in his hands. They were immaculate, which he'd polished them for this. I understood then, properly understood. The way you understand things when the detail makes the whole picture snap into focus. What the uniform had been about, not ceremony. Danny Carrick deserved the best version, because there was no other offering left. Because a man who'd spent 3 years beside you, who knew which of your brass fittings you'd missed, who understood the geometry of consequences well enough to protect the people around him even when he couldn't protect himself. That man, TBH, warranted the full-dress uniform and the bearskin cap and the economy seat and the 4-hour flight and the security standoff and the whole exhausting, costly spectacle of showing up correctly. Whitmore set the bearskin down on his knee. She asked, I guess, me to come to the service, he said. At the church he named a village in Derbyshire. That actually I've been to once for a training exercise in 2019 that I remember as being very quiet and very green. She said, to be fair, Danny always talked about me. I didn't say anything. He never mentioned that, Whitmore said, and when we talked, he never said. He looked at the wall across from us. I don't know if that means he was private about it or if he just assumed I knew. The fluorescent light overhead made a faint, irregular ticking sound. A small malfunction in the ballast. I basically had been noticing, gnawed it for 20 minutes. I didn't write it down, which go to the service, I said, as if the instruction had only been necessary because someone needed to say it out loud. He picked up the bearskin and stood, straightened his tunic with one hand, the automatic gesture of a man who has been straightening that particular tunic for 7 years. Looked down at me. You're not what I expected, he said. Logistics. No, I said. People usually aren't. He walked back down the corridor, the bearskin under his arm again, though he didn't put it on. His footsteps had the measured mechanical rhythm of parade drill. And then, somewhere around the corner where the corridor bent toward the exit, they didn't. I sat with my notebook open on my knee. Sort of. I didn't write anything. Some things file themselves.